is not the smartest guys in the room. Tom, you look perfect. I was watching the clock count down there, and now right on cue, I see you. How happy that makes me.
Good to see you too, man. Good to see you too. Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Good.
As always. Always happy to be here on Wednesday mornings.
I have a couple. Well, once some people get here, we'll talk about you traveling on Valentine's Day. I wanted to talk about what makes a good story. John Jay, we're talking about Tom staying over at my house on Valentine's Day. We are talking about, we're going to talk about what makes a good story. We're going to talk about passion. Why are you passionate? Do you have to be passionate about it to have a good story? Tom, let's start there.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think I don't think you have to be passionate to have a good story necessarily, but I think to tell a story well, it's important that you're passionate about the story you're telling, right? Because I think, especially when it comes to actually presenting a story in person, right? Or on a stage or something like that, like as an individual telling a story. And because there's obviously lots of ways to tell stories, whether it's written in a book or, through a visual medium like video or film. But if you're telling a story as a person, if you're telling a story to another person, I think being passionate about the story you're telling or how you're telling it is really important, because that carries over to your audience, right? That is, the audience takes their cues from the person that they're listening to, in terms of whether or not they should be excited about certain things, how they should feel about certain things. And they like to follow that journey of the storyteller. So I think, yeah, passion really does make a difference when you're in person or when you're telling a story, like verbally in particular. But I think generally it translates kind of across medium. I think it is important. I don't know that it's always crucial, but I think it really, really does make a dramatic difference in person when you're listening to someone speak. What do you think?
That's fair. I mean, I would think that there are some brilliant. Well, I think there are some storytellers, some videographers, or students of any of these genres that could tell a story without being passionate about it. But I would think it could take it to a whole nother level when you are. I would think if we're talking about Scorsese, he's passionate about it, or if you're writing about something, or John talking about crime. So I think it's tough. I think it can be done. Why would you want to do it?
Did you just call Scorsese a videographer?
So did I say that? I don't think I said that.
You started talking about videographers, and then you mentioned Scorsese.
I was going through all the mediums. I was going through all the mediums. No, I did not do that. John Jay, where do you stand, man? And we got, why are you passionate about what you do? What makes a good story? What do you think about Tom staying over at my house on Valentine's Day?
I think it's wonderful, Tom, spending the night on Valentine's Day. It's phenomenal. No, I don't think you need to be passionate about your subject matter in order to be a good storyteller. It helps, but realize that when it comes to telling a story or providing a platform for others to tell their story, you want to be engaging, you want to be entertaining, you want to have some passion for getting that story to the ears of consumers or eyes of consumers. Some of the best storytellers out there, there's no way you can sustain that level of passion, especially. Here's one I thought, and you guys are older, maybe not so much Tom. Charles Kuralt. Remember, he had a show On the Road with Charles Kuralt? And every time he went to a small town, he sounded just as passionate. He didn't grow up there. He had no connection with those towns. And I don't know if he did 500 episodes, 700, 1,000, but you can't maintain that level of passion for every episode you do. But you can maintain a level of passion for your storytelling. And that's the craft that you need. So, in answer, I don't think you need to be passionate. Some people might need that to get started. But somewhere along the line, that passion is going to ebb, it's going to subside, and you got to find your passion for storytelling for the consumer. That's just my personal take on it.
So fair to say, John, I just to clarify, because I agree with you. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're getting at is you got to be passionate about the craft, right, of storytelling.
Correct. Yeah.
But you don't have to be passionate about the subject.
Correct. Exactly. And so many people say, like you've got, they bleed this into the authenticity portion. If you're not an expert and deeply entrenched in this, then you can't be passionate. That's just not true. Passion for storytelling, but you don't have to have a clear cut passion for the subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Because I think, at the end of the day, some of the best, some of the best documentary filmmakers, right? I think are really passionate about not necessarily everything that they make a film about, but really what they're passionate about is bringing that understanding, revealing the truth behind something to the audience, right? The craft of creating a documentary, right, is really what they're passionate about, and they get obsessed with the individual subjects that they create documentaries on, right? But they don't necessarily they're not necessarily passionate about each of them, right? They're much more passionate about the craft of documentary filmmaking, right? So I think I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of examples of that, obviously, but I agree with you, John. I think that's a good point.
Okay, this is interesting. I want to just follow up with John because this is the fair points, and I'm thinking as a publisher, well, it could be the genre, but maybe I pull out details of the story because maybe not every story I wholly, but then when you get into a story and you help them develop this detail or that detail, pull this out. So my question, John, is as a radio guy, syndicated, 100 markets, you have a podcast too. What tips would you give somebody? Anybody here, they're interviewing somebody and they're not passionate about it, and I don't want to be so. And Jason, we're coming to you because he said I saw his little emoji there about being triggered. So, John, what tips would you give somebody? And I hate to use that you're not passionate, but just if it's not their forte.
Well, here's
What
what I
go
would
on?
say. Number one, and I learned this lesson a long time ago, doing a radio interview for an FM music show. And I complained to my program director that my guest was just not interesting. And the program director said, "That's your job. It's your job to create a stunning interview, make it better." Now, granted, there's some that are more challenging than others. The tips I would give are this: don't confuse expertise with passion or with the art of storytelling. And sometimes, quite often, that's what happens. People say, "Well, I'm an expert in this." No one, I'll say it again, I've said it many times, no one cares about your expertise. They care about your story. And from that story, you will get people to follow you, buy your book, engage you as a public speaker, go to your website, whatever it might be. That's how you capture people's attentions. So it's up to me to create the atmosphere. Because some guys, I did an interview yesterday where the guy's he's a pretty laid back guy, but he's got a really compelling story. So it's up to me to dig a little deeper to find ways to add and inject a little bit of enthusiasm, a little bit of excitement um, into the conversation, because it's not always going to be the guest that does that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, brother. Okay, so I'm going, Julie, if you don't mind, I think you'll appreciate this. I'm going to Jason because I saw he had put up a South Park thing that said something about triggered. So let's get the battle going. Jason, go on, my friend.
Oh, I put that up because that word authenticity, and I could care less for it, honestly. Like the people that talk about it so much, it's like you're putting the question, like, is this real or not real? I just put it like, is it interesting or not? And it's interesting that you're talking about passions because there's not a lot of things that I'm truly passionate about, but there's a lot of things that I'm interested in. And passion brings out my emotions. When you have passion, you have a level of intensity, whether joy or anger or however you want to deliberate on it, of what it's expressed. Some people are like, for example, very passionate about being Dallas Cowboy fans, and they lost their metaphorical, excuse my language, but you know, something I'm not going to say on air, but and broke their televisions, or seeing Philadelphia Eagle fans lose it, and they're passionate about their team. but it doesn't make it more interesting. It just, you really have to understand, like, what is truly intriguing and interesting versus passionate. Does passion always translate to be interesting? No, it doesn't. But it reveals things. It reveals how you feel, or the performance it gives off a feel. There was passion in a scene where a child dies in a mother's arms. Yeah, there's passion there. So I don't know. I think that when we're storytelling, that what keeps your listener, your viewer, your reader intrigued is not just as John would say, the punch in the mouth, but the mosquito bites of intrigue, laying the interest, what leads next, not giving everything, but giving just enough to keep following in a rhythm of the story of whatever you're telling. So, yeah, I'll just land there.
Right on, brother. Thank you. Okay, I thought Jason might get rowdy, but he's peaceful today. You must be drinking your mud coffee this morning. You still drink the mud coffee?
Yeah, I drink mud water.
Okay, yeah.
Right now I'm just drinking water.
Okay, well, there you go. All right, let's do this. Not the smartest guys in the room. Julie Loken, our fearless leader. Julie Loken, we're talking about what makes a good story. We're talking about passion, and we're talking about Tom staying over at my house on Valentine's Day. I wonder if he told his wife, though, or is he just going to drive? And what do you think, Julie?
I have a picture of you guys spooning. I don't know why I can't get that out of my head.
Your picture of what?
You guys spooning on Valentine's Day.
Oh, spooning. Duh. Go on, Jason.
Are you guys going to be filming this like on a Big Brother kind of, not the smartest guys 24/7?
I should mount some cameras in the spare bedroom and then sneak in and spoon them Big Brother style, like in the middle of the night.
We're gonna rock paper scissors to see who gets to be Big Spoon.
I have something. I have a beat to pick right now, really fast. With John Wiley, and he said, "Oh, you guys are all old in this room. Oh, maybe except for Tom." I was like, "Thanks, John." Did anyone catch that?
Yeah, I heard it. She was saying it sounds like you're writing a novel while you're talking, Julie. But
he's got a little bit of gray in his beard, so I think he's catching up to us. He's trying.
Yeah.
I think Tom could be older. Me and Tom are about the same age. I just turned 46 in
You guys
December.
are puppies. You're youngsters.
And Tom, how old are you?
You're a little bit ahead of me, but not much. I'm 45.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, but honest to God, and everybody in this room will think I am lying, but I
can't hear him. So
Dom froze. Dom froze. He was about to like drop a bomb, and then he froze up. He's frozen on my screen. Can't hear him. I don't know what happened. Oh man,
the divine powers interrupted him.
The suspense is killing me. Apparently, his technology was listening to you, Jason, with the trying to get him to punch people in the face, and now he disappeared off the live stream. Oh, here he is. Maybe coming back in. Maybe, possibly. He's just a blank screen right now. We'll see if his video comes back up. Don't know what happened. Oh, there he is. Now I can see him.
Even my phone.
Oh, you're all choppy there, buddy. Yep.
Is it that winter blizzard that's hitting the East Coast that's ruining the transmission?
I don't know. It's cold here, that's for sure. It was 14 degrees at my house when I got up this morning, which is not the coldest weather I've ever been in by any stretch, but definitely chilly for the Hudson Valley in New York. It's a little colder than usual.
Do you go running out in that weather, Tom?
Yeah, I definitely have. Today I didn't. I did a rowing workout instead. But yeah, I absolutely will go running in the weather. I just right now, because we just had snow yesterday, the roads are a little bit dicey, so I don't necessarily, and there's like no shoulder, so I don't necessarily want to run in the weather right now, but it's not because it's too cold. It's really more of a safety thing. I don't particularly need to go out and slip on ice or something and hurt myself, especially when I haven't even started training for my Ironman yet this year. So yeah, there's no sense in rushing out to hurt myself on the ice. Dom, you're frozen on my end, buddy. Can you hear us on Clubhouse? That's I'll take that as a no, that you're still muted. You're staying muted. I'm going to take you off screen on the live stream. Julie, what were you trying to say? You were trying to say something earlier, and you were breaking up, and it was hard for me to hear you. What were you saying about? You were saying something about me, I think.
Oh, just how young you are. Oh, sorry. How young you are. Sorry, I'm headed out to the airport right now. Getting back to.
Gotcha. Oh, we lost Dom out of the Clubhouse room.
She's getting out of Gilligan's Island. What?
Yeah, she's been Julie. Our friend Julie has been trapped in New Jersey for a week or parts.
Can you hear me or not? Can you hear me or not?
Now we can hear
I'd
you.
say, me and Tom were talking. I had a computer guy come out. We got all kinds of plans, hard drive, but this was my internet on my phone and on the computer that just went down. Is Julie actually still in New Jersey?
I think she's at the airport heading back to Illinois right now.
You got to give her some props. How mad would you be if it was like Thursday or Friday last week that she got stuck there. Wouldn't you just drive at some point?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. In all the travel I've done, I've had my fair share of time spent in airports and flights getting delayed and canceled and stuff like that. So I'm a pretty roll with the punches when it comes to travel kind of guy. Just because I've done it so much that, there's certain things like I know you can sort of make an impact on and maybe create a little bit of change, but a lot of it is just completely out of your hands. And like, you can get all kinds of angry about it, but it ain't going to get you anywhere. So it's, you're better off, keeping your stress levels low, keeping your blood pressure down, and just, letting things unfold, especially when you can't control them. Right. So I don't know.
There you go.
But
okay, let me tell you, I got one bar here. So if you lose me, that's the way it's going to be. So I was talking to Julie like 6 months ago, and she starts talking. She said something about like John said about young guys or old guys or whatever. And she asked me how old I was. And I said, I think I'm 46. And then I stuttered, and she was like, I said, wait, I'm 45. I don't know, 46. And she's like, you don't know how old you are? And like now I swear she thinks I'm lying, that I'm like made up my age or something like that. So I'm like, well, I'm 46, because now I don't want to say I'm younger than I was, because so then and then most of us, like after like I turned 40, I don't think I ever thought about a birthday. I don't like really want my family to bring presents or have celebrations. And it just is what it is. I feel weird like people celebrating that day. It's just not my thing. So anyway, this year I find out on my birthday, me and my wife like sit down and figure, well, how old are you? Because I know I'm 1 year older than her, like a couple months older than her. I am 46. So I just turned 46. So in my mind, I got a free year. So it's like a redo of last year, because I already thought I was 46. So I'm young again. I have 2 years to accomplish 1 year of stuff. It's amazing.
So I got a question about that story, Dom. When you said my wife and I sat down and figured out how old I was, did you need did you have to have like a pencil and paper to do the math? Like, were you doing it longhand? Like, what was going on there?
Well, we just seriously talked, because she's like, oh, wait, no, I'm this old. And then wait, so we just, because she knew. And then like, we just really had to think, no, yeah, you're this much older. And it's only a few months. So yeah, it took a conversation. So I get a free year, and I wasn't lying to Julie about how old I was.
That's funny. I envision, like the way you described it, I envision like a serious sit down.
A lab,
like,
yes.
We need to talk. right? Like, let's get out some paper. Where's my birth certificate? Like, let's get to the bottom of this case. Let's finally crack it. How old am I? But
I mean, we carried some
that's what I
ones.
was envisioning.
Yeah.
That's why I was laughing.
All right.
But
So yesterday I was in Jason's room, or maybe 2 days. Jason, hey, I love Jason's rooms on Clubhouse. Can we get some more rooms, live rooms on Clubhouse? John, I need you to have live rooms in the day. I'm not around
I'm
after at night.
working. I'm
Yeah.
working, and that's why I do 5 p.m.
I'm not around. So you see me when I'm around at that time of day. That's like family needs in the East Coast. That's daughter needs ride somewhere, wife's home from work. We need to do, I need more. I want more live rooms in the day so I can jump on and Jason host some live rooms. What about Kathy and Trish and Magnificent and Julie, April? How about, come on, give a guy some live rooms. But we were talking in one of Jason's rooms about the art of the story, like, and what makes a good story. And one of my thoughts was taking the story back as far as you can. So I brought up the fact, I wonder what makes Jason the way Jason is. I wonder what makes Tom so competitive. I wonder why Tom, I know about his wife doing the races, but there's more to it than that. So I wonder what makes Tom want to take on the challenge to run these ultras. And if I wanted to tell the story of Tom running these ultras, I'd want to get to a younger age and find out who he was before and find out, well, yeah, but if his wife pushed him, she didn't really push him. He just said, I was sitting on the couch, I saw her doing it, and I said I want to do it. But I think the story goes back farther than that, Tom. So answer and then tell us what makes a good story.
yeah, I mean, honestly, the story goes back to when I was a kid, right? So I started out, the first sort of athletic endeavor that I was ever involved in as a kid was I was on my town in the summer, like through the town pool, has a swim team, right? Still do to this day, the town I grew up in. And so I was on the summer swim team in the town I grew up in. And we would, go around and swim against other towns in the area. And there was a county championship at the end of the summer. And I was on the swim team from the time I was about 6 years old until I think I was 12 was the last summer that I was on the swim team. And then I started getting involved with sports at school. So I loved sport and kind of loved competing and loved being active from the time I was very young. And then I was a competitive athlete in middle school and high school. I played 3 varsity sports in high school. I was on the varsity football team. I was on the varsity indoor track team. And then I was on the varsity lacrosse team. And my senior year in high school, I got injured playing football. Basically took a cheap shot. Kid missed his block on me. We were on defense. I was playing defensive tackle and I shot the gap. Kid missed his block. And I took a shoulder pad in the knee, in the side of my knee. His helmet was behind my knee. He clipped me and tore the cartilage in my knee. So went for an MRI. The radiologist who read the first MRI missed the tear. And said nothing's torn, just a sprain, just a little. Despite the fact that I heard it crunch, like I felt it crunch when I got hit. Got missed. Kept playing on it. Got to the point by the end of the season where I could like barely walk around. It was so painful and so swollen, and ended up going to have surgery. Missed my lacrosse season my senior year in high school. Which was a real bummer because that was actually my favorite sport. And then after that, like I basically had a doctor tell me, a year later, I had a second surgery to remove some more torn cartilage. And after the second surgery, I had a doctor tell me, and I don't believe there was any sort of malfeasance on his part. I think he was just telling me what he thought was the best advice he could give me at the time. But he literally said to me, no more running. And I looked at him. I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, let me paint a picture for you. If somebody's pointing a gun at you, you can run. And if they're not, no running. ever. So from the time I was 19 years old until I was, getting into my in my 30s, I basically, in my late 30s, I basically wasn't active at all. So for almost 20 years, I did nothing athletic because I believed that doctor when he told me couldn't run anymore. So I kind of went down the path of like, well, if I can't run, then I'm going to do what I would have done instead of it as much, right? So like I had a lot of fun in my 20s. I partied a lot. I drank a lot. I ate whatever I wanted, and had a really good time. But kind of, was getting into my late 30s and was wanting to do something different. Was kind of feeling that I was over that, right? I'd kind of been there, done that, and didn't really, and I was in a long-term relationship with Becky, who's now my wife. So she came home from marathon training one day, and it was the longest run she'd ever done. She walks back into the house after running 20 miles, and I'd only made it from the bed to the couch, and I was sitting there drinking coffee. And I just remember vividly, she walked into the kitchen, and I just kind of sat there and thought to myself, man, I am a lazy, lazy, lazy pile of shit. I need to get up and do something. Like not right now, but just generally speaking. And that was the turning point, was that internal thought. I wanted to get back to doing something active. It seemed like if I'm going to do anything, to the extreme that I tend to do things, probably a good choice is something athletic and something that's good for you. So, so that's what I started. That's when I started, doing serious training and taking things seriously, and did my first triathlon a month before I turned 40.
See, that's the stuff, Tom. And I bring that up, and I did not know Tom's story, but about the injuries and things like that. But once you take somebody back, and now you need to be able to articulate it just like Tom did. But once you take somebody back, and that is the root of the hero's journey, in storytelling. If I could take you back to where it started, take you back so far, take the reader back, the viewer back. And now, if Tom just said, like usually, let's say Tom tells us I'm running a race this weekend. Well, maybe we're not cheering for him. Yeah, so what? But now, if I know, well, here's this guy, he's been through some stuff, been through some injury, sat on the sideline for a while, had some doubts. Now I'm like, I'm rooting for this guy. So, JC, we're talking about what makes a good story. We're digging into Tom's, like one day I was asking Jason, I wonder why Jason's as stern as he is. He was in the military. I think he said single mother, there was a few things that made him tough. So go on, JC. What makes a good story? Okay, what makes a good story? Why are you passionate about what you do? Feel free to give a tip or share anything else, because that's what we do here. So go on, man.
Yeah, well, first of all, great morning to all you guys. And Tom, I didn't know that you played lacrosse, man. I was a big lacrosse player. I played D1 lacrosse in college. I played it in high school, and so big fan of lacrosse. Maybe we'll go to a game one day.
There you go.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't know if you know this, Tom, but they're coming out with a movie about the ancient game of Taorathon, like with the Indians and stuff. It's going to be pretty cool. Like that was an extremely violent game. So there's going to be some sort of like major broadcast movie about that. So, yeah, what's interesting about stories are such a powerful tool to use, whether you're writing a book or public speaking. But at the same time, you know, they can also, like I was reading a book the other day, and I found myself like not wanting to listen to the story and just to the takeaway. sometimes sometimes the story could be like 85% of a chapter, like in many cases my book is. Um and I'm just looking for the information. So I just recall feeling that way. But I think what's relatability and
Hey, JC,
commonality.
hold on. This is a good.
Yeah.
What made you about this specific particular story.
Yeah.
What made you? Because usually we are saying story, story, story. My daughter was just telling me
Yeah, I
she
was
was.
I was reading
Go
a
on.
book and I wasn't interested in the story as much as the lesson and the skill set, and the strategy. So I just found myself, oh, maybe that's, in light of this topic, maybe it wasn't a captivating story, which is,
That's what I was
the
asking. Did
key.
they do?
But
Did they
but
do
at the
something
same time,
wrong?
like
Too many details. Go on.
I read a book every week. So if you read as much as me, you come across the fact that a lot of books are shit, but they still every book has an amazing lesson in it. So I guess that probably plays into it too. Like I can get bored with somebody that's not a good storyteller. Maybe that's what it was. Um, but I think that there's different ways of starting stories. Like sometimes I like when I'm reading or listening, if somebody makes a point that they're trying to make by telling a story. But I also like sometimes in a TED talk or something, or a talk, the way I'll do it is I'll just go into a story that will captivate people, that will lead to a lesson. So there's different strategies of telling stories. Like, I came in while Tom was telling his story, so I don't know how he led into it, but that's a big part of storytelling. Um, but I think what makes a good story is just, obviously somebody moving from dark into light, you know, or somebody handling like a big pivotal moment in their life and how they navigated it. So I think when you're listening to a story, I think everybody likes to be inspired and things like that. But I think that a good story is one that you can relate to in your own way. So I love telling stories and also reading about stories that you know have these pivot points and these obstacles that either people tell a story of how they navigated it and followed through, or it shifted them off course but then brought them back one day. So like, if I take Tom's story, you know I know what that's like to be thrown off track and you know just unconsciously move from being an athlete to, doing stupid things. Like I've done a lot of stupid things. But then all of a sudden having an awakening, and like that's exciting because if I'm somebody that's in a rut and I'm hearing Tom's story, I like the idea that I too one day could walk into the kitchen and have an awakening. So, it's just all about relatability and stuff. What I don't like are stories that are just good stories that don't like have a lesson in it or something like that. Like I've got a lot of funny stories about stupid shit that I did with my friends in college or in a fraternity and stuff like that, that are good stories to tell each other. But from the stage or in a book, unless I'm just trying to be a comedian. So I like stories that have context and lessons that I can use.
Go ahead, Tom. Sorry. I have to say that I've been on the stage before, and you think a story's good, and then you get up there and like you thought you'd make this message, and then you tell it, and it wasn't the right place for that story, and you can see like somebody in the audience like look at you a certain way, and you're like, "Shit, I'm not telling that one again." Go on, Tom.
Yeah, I was going to say, JC, I appreciate that. One thing, just jumping back to the lacrosse thing. You're definitely a better lacrosse player than I ever was because I was not going to play D1. I would have sat the bench in D1. I would have played some D2. I don't know that I would have started, but I definitely would have played D2.
That's
But yeah, I
that's
wouldn't have
that's
played.
that's good lacrosse, man.
Yeah, I mean, I would have been warm in the bench. I would have been riding pine in D1, but I loved lacrosse. I had a lot of fun. I played defense. I was a crease defenseman, and the thing we used to do, and this is just for JC. I'll be very very brief with it. But the thing we used to do is I also was really good at face-offs. I had quick hands, and so I would come up and take face-offs with my long stick. And it would totally psych out the other team. They would be super confused, have no idea what to do about it. and not really know what to expect. And it worked.
That's
It worked
actually
so
that's
often.
actually a very, very normal, common strategy in lacrosse today. And you know what's fun? Because Tom, you're a runner now again, right? You're out there training.
Yep.
So
Yep. I still sometimes have trouble thinking of myself as a runner, but yeah, I am a
so
runner.
I'm 52 and I play still in a high level men's league. Like we go to Lake Placid and play in these big tournaments against all the greats from the old days. So if you ever want to step on the field again, nobody rides the pine in their 50s.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I appreciate that. We'll have to talk more offline about that. Um, I just wanted to throw in too. I think one of the things that a lot of people miss is that really ultimately, like the one thing that all good stories have in common, right, is structure. And the structure that you use in telling a story is part of what makes it relatable, as JC was talking about. It's part of what gives the audience the opportunity to empathize with, to understand the characters, and to sort of go along with them on the journey they're on through the story. So I tend to think of this, like broadly speaking, the way I've kind of broken things down, or the way I talk about storytelling, is I think of it in sort of a structure of 4 acts. And if you hear people talk about like filmmaking, or you hear people talk about like plays, you probably are familiar with plays having multiple acts. I think about it in terms of a 4-act structure, and kind of this is how I tend to break it down, right? So Act 1, I think of as like laying the foundation. That's where you give the context for the story. You paint a picture of where the story is taking place, who the players are, who the main characters are, and give the audience an opportunity to get to know them a little bit, right? So that's the laying the foundation is Act 1. Then Act 2 is sort of where the action starts, right? That's where you'll often find the inciting incident, whatever it is that triggers the thing that triggers the journey, right? In the story I was telling before, the thing that triggered my journey into becoming an Ironman triathlete was my wife walking in from her longest ever run, and me having that sort of moment of realization. That was the inciting event, right? So there's in Act 2, you have the action, and you start to travel down the path that inciting incident creates. Then in Act 3, you that builds that action, that inciting incident builds to a climax, right? So that's if you think about it, if you analogize it to, or use the metaphor of like riding a roller coaster, which probably all of us in this room have done at one point in our lives or another, whether you like roller coasters or not, you've probably been on one, and if not, you're definitely familiar with how they work, right? The old school roller coasters where you get on and there's a chain and it pulls you up the hill, right? So you start out, the context is when you're just getting in the roller coaster, you're getting buckled in. That's Act 1. Act 2 is you're on that climb, right? You're going up to the top of the first drop, clunk, 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 right? As you climb up on the roller coaster. And then the climax is right at the very top as you start to go over the top of that first drop, right? That the top of that hill, that's this climax. And then the climax can last like kind of through the whole roller coaster ride, right? So it's you're going over the top, and then the climax is that sort of heightened tension, that heightened state, where everything comes to a head in the story. And then finally, you have the resolution. And that's the part of, in continuing the roller coaster metaphor, that's the part where you pull back in to the loading area at the end, right? There's usually a kind of a slow curve, gentle, kind of like calming you down as you come back in. It's also the thing that's super common, in a lot of, you'll see in a lot of stories, especially like an action movie, there'll be a big knockdown, drag out sort of battle in an action movie, the biggest action sequence of the film. And then after that, there's sort of a wrap up sequence, right? Where like we show what happened immediately following or in the aftermath of that incident. Like, who survived, who didn't, what they went on to do after the fact, et cetera. That's the resolution. That's that's Act 4. So that's the way I kind of like to think about storytelling, in terms of structure. But every good story has a structure, and they don't all follow the exact same structure, but they have a structure, I promise you. And I think that's one of the key things to actually telling a good story is making sure that you follow a structure and you give your audience the opportunity to go along on that journey with you. That's, I think, one of the most important things that a lot of people don't think about necessarily unless you're sort of enmeshed in the industry and tell stories, with a lot of intention and thought. You don't really think about breaking it down on that level, but that's the way I tend to think about it.
Tom, man, this is my love, my love of my life. What Tom is talking about here, I'll sit with my wife and watch any movie, and it could be, let's say, like rom-coms. I love breaking down rom-coms, or like part of this 3-act structure. A lot of times is always lost. So a note at some point in Act 3, always lost. And so there's, like, let's say in Pretty Woman, trying to go to a movie that most of us have seen, Pretty Woman, Richard Gere. Like, Julia Roberts leaves Richard Gere. Richard Gere decides that he tries to pay her. Then so sometimes always lost happens to multiple characters. Like, you could have like in Pretty Woman, there is always lost when he loses her, and there's always lost when he makes an offer that she doesn't like. She's like, well, that was a good offer for a girl, but things have changed. And then she goes off and he's out on the balcony, he feels it. And the proposal that Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock, she goes down the aisle and she decides that she's not going to go through the marriage. And she leaves him at the altar, always lost. Then she flies away in the plane, always lost. And there's in all these movies that you see the same thing. So sometimes I'm reading a story and I'm like, I'm writing a story right now. I have a girl that used to intern me. She finished film school. Me and a guy are writing it that does a lot of work in the industry. We don't have always lost. I know my always lost isn't good enough. And so I have it in the film school girl's hands, because I know at this point of the story, it's not good enough because my always lost isn't strong enough. So I have her looking at it and she's like, well, Dominick, did you know that sometimes a character has morals, and maybe if we establish these morals earlier in the story, we could use a different always lost than what you're thinking. It doesn't have to be he cheated on her, somebody died, whatever. So I'm all into this conversation, Tom, that we might do 10 hours on the big twist, like in Gone with the Wind. Anybody see Gone with the Wind? So I'll go back and I go back and watch Gone with the Wind. Okay, Heather likes Gone with the Wind. Okay. I just watched it recently. Now, there's the big twist in a movie. What I realize now from going back and watching Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, I just watched Breakfast at Tiffany's recently. There used to be intermissions in a lot of movies because there's a structure. Right around time of big twist, boom, is when and it had Gone with the Wind. A lot of people consider it like a perfectly written movie. It's a different time. But right when the biggest twist happens, they go to intermission. And now if you're a viewer of because the movie Gone with the Wind stops and it's like intermission and you're like, what's going on here? Because it's 50 years later and we don't have intermissions anymore, but it is on this act of, climax, first act, second act, build, big twist. So anyway, Heather, you're up. Tom got me excited. Go on.
Yeah, so I really appreciate this conversation in regards to storytelling, because I'm really leaning into that for 2024, and I feel as though a lot of brands should. Um, and I've been doing a lot of storytelling over on TikTok. So if you're not following me over there, just shoot me a follow. But I actually told the story, and I have lots of stories. Like, I've been in social media management and strategy and content creation and website design for almost 15 years. So that's 15 years of stories. And, there's some stories that I could tell about, horrible past clients. I could talk about those who are, tried to be a client and they were disrespectful and rude, but that's that's something that you don't want to talk about because that's so negative. Now granted, you can make humor around it, but I'm trying to really focus in on the stories that like got me to where I'm at. One of the stories that I told was my journey onto diners, drive-ins, and dives, how I got onto diners, drive-ins, and dives. And it all started with a cold email. I was driving around my state, and that's what I do. I drive around my state and I watch people. I watch the locations, new locations, brick and mortars, and trucks and vans and trailers and all this stuff. Like I look for branding, I look for local businesses, and I check out their website. I contact them. Like I'll take a picture while I'm driving around and take a picture of their trailer or their truck and being like, hey, like I saw your business. I saw you don't have social media. Like let's chat. I've been doing this for almost 15 years, blah, blah, blah. But so that's how it happened. I cold emailed a guy named Billy Rostrom. He was known as the Sausage King of Delaware. And I cold emailed him after I saw his truck pulling his food trailer. And his food trailer is called Maiale. That's Italian for pig. And it's Maiale Deli in Salumeria. And so I cold emailed him. I was like, hey, my name is Heather Cox. I just saw your trailer. I just saw your website link and I went to it and I think I could help you. And literally within a week, like I went and I had a meeting with him and he became a client and I redid his website. And then that turned to me managing his social media management. And then he applied for diners, drive-ins, and dives and he got it. But and we were freaking out, man. And there's a little more backstory. Like apparently I used to have Sunday dinners with this dude like every Sunday because my dad worked for his dad and we didn't even freaking know it. So that was crazy. But then there's lots of work that goes into being on Triple D. Like you have to make sure everything is like sparkly shiny, like your walk-in, your kitchen, everything. And so the front of the house needed some work. So I was like, let me roll up my sleeves. Like I'm going to clean this front end of the house. I like rearranged all their photos. I cleaned everything. Like it looked so good. And then the day of filming, I'm like walking around. I'm getting behind the scenes social media. I'm like, hey, producers, you need something to drink. Oh, something's not working. I got you. I'll fix it. And like all this stuff. And then comes the point where they start filming and they need a waitress. Well, Maiale Deli does not have waitresses. They're self-serve. You go up to the counter, you get a number, you take the number to your table, and then the food runner runs your food to you. They don't have waitresses. But for Triple D, you need waitresses on the show because when they present a food item on the show, the quote unquote waitress needs to say the food item so that the person who is viewing the show knows what food they're talking about. But we didn't have that. So I was like, I could pretend to be a waitress. And I did so. So I am on Triple D under the International Infusion episode. If you just look that up, Triple D or Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, International Infusion. And I literally had to walk a sandwich to a table and
So
put it
Heather,
down.
are you saying you got one of your restaurants on Triple D, or you
No,
were
because
okay?
so he applied and
Okay,
he got
gotcha.
it himself, but they needed a waitress, quote unquote, and they don't have waitresses. So I was there doing the social media stuff for him during Triple D and the filming of it. And so they needed a waitress. They didn't have it. And I was like, I'll do it. So I pretended to be a waitress for my client who got on Triple D. And so that's how I was able to get on Triple D, all through a cold email asking, hey, I want to do your website. And then it snowballed into us knowing that we actually knew each other for growing up. And then that turned into a friendship and that turned into a long clientele. I was with them for 6-7 years. And then that got me onto Triple D, which was awesome. So don't, and what you said, Tom, don't discount like what the lesson is. And oh no, that was Dragon. The lesson is don't, like literally anything can happen from a cold email. So like that was the lesson. And so I'm really leaning into the storytelling to be like, this is how I got where I'm at. This is how I got that thing because I leaned into like just going above and beyond for the client and like, just kind of taking a chance on a cold email. You never know where it will lead. So storytelling, huge, even in like the current marketing class I'm in, which is managing marketing for the hospitality and tourism industry from Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And they are also stating that we are in marketing 4.0, which is storytelling to specific niche channels across omni-channel presence. So I thought that was interesting, and I will hand it back to you, Dom. Thanks.
Thank you, Heather.
Well, Dom, it looks like you're, I think you're frozen on my side. We're having some internet issues today, so bear with us. But thanks for sharing that, Heather. And yeah, I agree. Like, I think it's one of the things. It's a common thing that I hear a lot, but it's also something that I think you can't say too often, right? That you can't stress enough is, that old sort of adage of you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And there is no sort of loss. There is no harm in just taking a chance, right? And betting on yourself, and reaching out, right? If you're inspired to reach out, then you should. And it absolutely can work out in your favor. Like I have a story about that. When I was in my 20s, I ended up regularly speaking with the White House, because I took a chance. I was working on a TV show. We were filming in Texas. It was during the Bush administration, and we were filming in a school down in Texas. And Laura Bush's big initiative when she was the first lady was education. And so we reached out because we were going to be close to their hometown. And we were going to be filming in a school and doing this sort of this makeover show in a school, helping to revitalize some classrooms there. And I reached out on a whim. And what do you know? But I ended up having multiple phone calls, like speaking on a regular basis with the First Lady's press secretary and chief of staff, trying to figure out scheduling and whether or not we could make it work. And ultimately it ended up not panning out. But, I just picked up the phone and called the White House, and I ended up getting through to the chief of staff for the First Lady. So, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I never would have gotten close to that, or been in a situation where at my office, I would get a call transferred to me from the White House, which was pretty interesting. So there was a lot of confusion. The receptionist, because we didn't have direct dial numbers, they had to call the main number and then get transferred to me. And the receptionist called me up one time and said, "I've got the White House on the line for you. Does that sound right?" And I was like, "Yep, I'm expecting a call. Thanks." And there I was, like a 25-year-old kid chatting with the White House. So you never know. You gotta take a chance. Gotta take a chance.
Can I share a quick funny thing that happened 2 days ago, story
Absolutely.
wise? So I don't know if you guys know, very, very prominent public speaker. He's got a huge following. His name is Nick Sanastazzo. He's got no arms and legs. I don't know if you guys know who that is. But look him up. I mean, he's just got a massive presence. He's become a massive success speaking on all the biggest stages. So anyway, I like what he does, but I'm always trying to get the attention of these people, not necessarily to do business, just to network and see if I can get them on my podcast and things like that. So he was doing a live 2 days ago, and when this guy goes on live, I mean, he's very quickly he's got thousands of people on there. So I try to get in the beginning, and he's asking that common question, and this is kind of like Heather in a sense, like, or what Tom just said, if you don't, take a shot, you'll miss it. So he's basically saying, "Hey, where's everybody from?" Checking in, and everybody's telling him. So I always try to say something different, especially when I see that the person's reading it. So I write, everybody's saying Florida, Chicago, Dallas, or whatever, and I write planet Earth. Right? Now, he didn't see it the first time, so I wrote it again. And then on his live, he laughs. He goes, "Haha, planet Earth." And then I heard his cameraman laugh as well. So I'm like, okay, boom, level one accomplished. So then what I did is about an hour after his live, I said, I go into his DM, which these guys very rarely have the opportunity to look at all of them. But I take a stab and I just said, "Hey, Nick, I loved your live today. I'm the planet Earth guy." So within 10 minutes, he responds to me, and he complimented me on it. He thought that was really funny. And then he kind of went into a little bit of his pitch, like he was kind of navigating me obviously, like, what's your biggest struggle? What's holding you back? And things like that. So here's my other opportunity to either like play that game or say something different, right? So long story short, he's like, so, what's your biggest chokehold? What's holding you back? And I said, nothing really. I said, right now, I'm just trying my best to not be an asshole. So that's what I said to them. And he just thought that was the funniest answer he's ever heard. And here I am 2 days later, like having this conversation, not about business with him. Then I finally said, "Hey, man, I'd love to have you on the podcast. I think you'd be great for it." And he's like, "I'd love that." So just sharing, this guy doesn't know me from a hole in the wall, and how it's a fun story to tell, but it also reminds you, be different, you know, just don't follow the norm and the herd mentality of just like saying what you always think you're supposed to say. Because if you can, it's just a good way to get people on your show and things like that. Anyway,
JC, good stuff, man. And I think what's interesting about that too, besides knowing that Nick, right? Nick knowing his story, and I think he was electrocuted, if I'm right, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting story. But what's very unique about what you said is JC didn't ask. He just was a cool dude talking to a guy and made no ask. And the guy, they started developing a relationship that wasn't around some, JC wasn't working him for anything. He just became friendly with
build,
him. And
build friendship, trust, no hidden agenda. And I didn't have it. I guess my hidden agenda is I wanted to get to know the guy.
yeah,
I
just
mean,
know
it's
him. What's wrong
got
with
a big
that?
context here, but I mean, he kind of went into his shtick, and that's when I said something different there, and that took the guard down. So I think that's sometimes all you really need to do. I mean, I would assume that if you're responding to DMs, like hundreds of them a day, and just doing your, hey, speak to my lead guy and blah blah blah, it's pretty easy to say something that would capture your interest because you're just used to having. So I just don't think enough people think like that. Just to take a different approach. And the reason why I asked him, to be honest with you, and Tom will like this, I didn't just automatically say I want this guy on my show because he's cool and he's got a huge following. I actually started to get to know him better because now we're talking, and he knows that I know him because I've learned things about him that maybe others don't know. So then when I asked him to be on my show, he knew that I genuinely thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, well said, JC. Appreciate you, man. Okay, that's Prof T's here. Billy in the house. Magnificent. Trish. Magnificent said she can't come up on the stage. Trish, April, Carrie, come on up. Austin, how you been? Prof T. Okay. Hey, we're going to Billy, and I wanted to tell you something about. This is weird. So the spoon keeps coming up today and spooning. So if you weren't here earlier, Tom is coming to my house on Valentine's Day. He's staying over, and then we're driving to Creative Con after that the next day. So it just so happens it is Valentine's. So I asked him this morning, like, I know you just got married, you're having a baby soon, just so you know. But where I wanted to go with this is, and somebody said about spooning, and now spooning came up again. Not so long ago, my wife said something about, this is like a year ago. My wife said something about spooning. There's the spoon, and I said, yeah, I'd be the fork, and and like it was a revelation that this whole spooning thing is two spoons fitting together. And I was like, well, the spoon and the fork go together. But I didn't know it was all about how the spoon and another spoon actually fit together. So now I'm a new man a year later because I now understand that this terminology is that two spoons resting right beside each other fit together. It is not that like a spoon and a fork should go together. So that's all.
Yeah,
How's that, Tom?
it's about the shape, not about silverware.
Yes, yeah, I learned, and now I know. Okay, so Billy, we're talking about storytelling here. That was an odd one, probably shouldn't have told, but go on, man. We're talking about what makes a good story and what makes you passionate about what you do. Go on. And John mentioned earlier, I will say, John mentioned earlier that like you could pull stories out of people. That you don't necessarily have to be passionate about every story, passionate about how the story's told and getting the best out of people. So go on, Billy.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope you're doing good. I love the spoon revelation you had there. That's pretty funny. You had me laughing. Yeah, man. Somebody that I love telling stories. I don't really think stories through, so I'm probably not a good storyteller. But one thing that I enjoy about listening to a story or reading a story or watching a movie is the vulnerability of the story and the transparency of the story, especially when it comes to social media. Because I think a lot of times we're participating in, we're watching someone's highlight reel, which is totally fair, totally fine. It's their prerogative to share what they want, when they want, how they want. But I think too often we're going, holy cow, this person had, and I had this happen a couple of years ago. Somebody, reached out to me as a friend from high school, or I reached out to him, I can't remember, just to reconnect. And he was like, dude, you got it all together, man. Like, you're crushing it. You're doing great. You're doing awesome. And I was like, why do you think that? He's like, well, I follow you on social media. And I was like, dude, you realize, like, I'm just sharing my highlight reel, dude. I'm not sharing the shit I go through every day. I'm not sharing the crap I suck at. Like, I'm sharing what I'm good at, but it really caught me off guard because I was like, wow, man, I'm putting this persona out there, even on a very, very small level with a very small audience, that, I am something that I'm really not. And so, I don't know, man. So, anyway, since then, I've been trying to, when I am communicating stories or situations or whatever, just to be very transparent, probably even to a fault. I would say I've lost business due to transparency. I've probably lost friends and family relationships due to transparency, but I just want stuff to be real, and I want to keep it as real as I can. I mean, obviously, there is a part of my personality that's an entertainer, that's a content creator, a creative. There is a little bit of a facade, no matter how much I try to shake it. That if you were sitting down having a cup of coffee with me, that you're not necessarily going to be like, oh, you're a little bit different than you are on camera. I mean, I think we're all going to have that. But anyway, yeah. So I enjoy when people are real, when they're vulnerable, when they have a little transparency in the mix.
I think that's important. I mean, like, I try to be, transparent, to a fault and beyond. So I'm right there with you, Billy. I mean, I think it's important to do. It's also a great way to build trust, right? If you're very transparent, personally in business, right, then it's easy to build trust with people because they believe and they know and they can take comfort in the fact that they know exactly where they stand, right, and what they're going to get with you. Whereas I think a lot of times, and I just got an email about this the other day, somebody was telling me that they've been burned by marketing consultants in the past. And the first thing that popped into my head was they were probably over-promising and under-delivering. They were saying what they thought they needed to say to get the consultancy job, and then not actually delivering on what they promised because one thing didn't really relate to the other. So I think being transparent is really, really important in business, in life, also in storytelling, because it's that vulnerability in the stories that you tell that give people and give the audience the opportunity to connect with you, right? To use Jason's least favorite word, it's what lets people, cling on to that level of authenticity that you bring to the way that you tell a story. That really gives the audience an opportunity to come along on that journey with you. So there has to be vulnerability, there has to be transparency, or else the audience is they're just spectators, right? If they're not along for the journey, they're not part of the story, they don't relate to the story, they're not empathizing with the characters. If you don't give them the opportunity to, and you do that through that sort of authenticity and that transparency. So I think it's super important. You're probably a better storyteller than you give yourself credit for.
Yeah, and I was in just on the story he was telling right there. Billy, what makes you think that being authentic or has made you lose some business? I find that interesting. And I mean, it could be, but I'm just wondering. Go on.
Well, I think when it comes to, not really in my current business model, but kind of before I got into what I'm doing now, I was on this journey of helping a lot of podcasters monetize through sponsorships or whatever. So this is just one example. Um, and it's just, it's work. And I was just very transparent about, like, hey, this is work. Like, this isn't going to be a path to success. It's not going to be very easy. It's going to be a lot of phone calls. It's a sales job, because they thought I was going to give them a magic wand where they shake it a couple times and money falls in their bank account. I'm like, nope, it's a sales gig. You got to do some upfront work. You got to figure out who your, audience is, who your niche is, blah, blah, blah. It's upfront work. And so, same thing when I owned a t-shirt printing business for a decade. People will call me all the time. I got this $1 million t-shirt idea. I'm like, cool, man, get in line. I've talked to 12 of you today. And when I brought the reality of what it is like to launch a t-shirt brand into the market, a lot of people just backed out because they're like, oh, I didn't know it was that, so I'm out. And so I think that's, whatever. I mean, but it's like when when I tell these stories about people who have hundreds of t-shirts in their closet who also had a great idea, it's like, and out thousands of dollars, made no money, it quickly deterred people from doing that. And where I don't, and I'm not going to say most, but I know, very much like Tom just shared about that marketing agency. I know a lot of screen printers, promotional people, coaches, consultants who will tell you whatever you want to know until you sign the check. And then it's like, now you're screwed. And so I don't know, man. I think I probably lost opportunities that way, and maybe it wouldn't have went that way. Maybe they would have went the other direction. But I was just very upfront about what is this really going to take to be successful in these two areas. In my past experience, so that doesn't happen as much anymore because I'm pretty much just delivering for like certain companies or whatever. And the workload's on me. So anyway, yeah, hopefully that helps.
No, it does. And I feel you 100% on that because as a publisher, we have that rough talk. And I know a lot of you have written books in here, Prof. T. Tom just wrote a book. JC writes books. You need to be out in the world. You need to be out giving interviews. You need to be out speaking. The people that sell the most books are the people that are out there. Like I can see my guys, like I'll have one of my authors will call me and they'll be like, oh, had a speech today. It went pretty good. Hey, guess what? And I'm like, what? He's like, sold 300 books, and I see the people that are out there doing it have the most success.
Hey, Dom, I wanted to actually say something real quick, which is
go on, Heather.
Because I'm taking my daughter to see an author, to meet an author tomorrow at Barnes & Noble because she's doing a book tour across the East Coast. So You're 100% right that you need to be out there because if you aren't, you're not going to sell books.
Yeah, and so if you're giving speeches, like let's say me when I did the chamber circuit, the Rotary circuit, the county fairs, well, I knew I'm going to sell 20 books, 50 books, 100 books, whatever it was at those types of places. Okay, I'm there 2 days. How many hours am I going to be there? You are out there. You meet more people like everybody. You should be on podcasts. But if Billy, I tell this to authors, well, I'm not really comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable doing a podcast. I'm kind of busy. I have kids. I can't. Well, you are going to sell less books than the next person. That's the hard fact that I will give people. And so once you broke it down like that, Billy, teach me how I don't blow sales, because a lot of times when we have those realistic talks like that, people don't want to hear it. Actually, one day a guy told me, and I tried to be straightforward, and it was a friend, and we were talking, and he said to me, "That's not a pep talk, that's a poop talk." and I didn't mean to come down on him like that, but I was just giving him the reality of, here's what the work it's going to take, and here's where you're at, and the market, and only this percentage of the population reads, so you'd have to be out promoting, and your subject matter is pretty unique. Like Heather, you talked about writing a book on coding one day. Well, okay, now that the market is smaller for that book doesn't mean yours isn't going to be the number one seller in coding, and but even still, okay, but now if you write, okay, I'm going to get into this real quick. Don't get mad at me. So Heather writes a book on coding. Sometimes when you write a book, your family and friends buy your book. That's a percentage of the population, but only a certain percentage of your family and friends even read. Okay, so cut that from the, okay, even if you go to your followers, only a certain percentage of your followers read. Only a certain percentage of your family and friends and followers read whatever type of book you are putting out. Only a certain percentage of your family and friends read a book about coding. So now you better get out to more people, more groups, more podcasts, more radio shows, because everything you do, only a certain percentage of the audience is finding whatever subject you're writing about, if they even read. So sorry for the, as my friend said, poop talk, but it's reality check. All right, Tom, go on.
I was going to jump back to something Billy was saying, just a different kind of spin or perspective on what you were talking about, Billy, in terms of like, costing yourself business. Like the things, the situations you described, I actually would look at as, you didn't cost yourself business. You probably saved yourself a lot of headaches, because it sounds like all of those people you were describing were people that would have been terrible clients, that you probably would have ended up having to fire as a client because they had unrealistic expectations going in. And despite your best efforts, right? Like, cause I know I've had this happen, right? Like despite my best efforts, I've had people have unreasonable expectations of not necessarily the content that they were going to get from me, but how it would perform for them, right? And what it would do for their business. And I've had people turn around and go, we've had this video on our website, for a month, and we haven't seen any uptick in sales. And I'm like, well, that's not how any of this works. I don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, well, we thought the video was going to be really important for our business. And I'm like, it is, but it's not flipping a switch, right? You're not turning the light on all of a sudden going, we got a video, and everybody's going, holy shit, they got a video. We should go do business with them. Like, that's not how this works. Right. So yeah, I mean, I speak from experience. I've definitely had that kind of stuff happen. So yeah, I would look at that as like that kind of transparency helps kind of weed out, and separate the wheat from the chaff, and like, makes it easier to decide who are the good clients and the people you want to do business with and you want to have a relationship with, and the people who you're happy to let go and tell them that they should look elsewhere for support. So that's my thought.
All right, perfect. And I know Dr. Tachi loves to talk about firing clients. She's talked about that before. So Dr. Tachi, storytelling, firing clients, and did Tom say wheat from the chaff? Go on, Dr. Tachi.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, that's my mother's favorite saying, wheat from the chaff. And for the longest time when I was little, I didn't know, what the hell? Wheat from the chaff? What does that mean? So when you said that, it conjured up all these images, because I actually picture somebody separating wheat from chaff whenever anybody says idioms like that. So storytelling. Okay, can you go back, because I was away for a moment. What exactly about storytelling were we talking about?
I think first, before we do that, I think, Dr. Tachi, if you could explain to Dom what wheat and chaff are, because he's I don't know if you can see his face if you're watching on the live stream, but he's not there with us. I think Dom is today years old when he learned what that phrase.
I am. I'm Googling it. I'm going to Google it too. So go on, Dr. Tachi, teach me.
Google it and tell me, damn it, because I'm still not quite. I'm imagining though it is the process of separating the wheat from like the outside part of it, the quote kernels of wheat. You know better than I do, Tom. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, basically, right. So wheat is a grass. For anyone who doesn't know, wheat is a grass, and there's a process called threshing, which is where you essentially, wheat is the berry, right, or the seed of the grass, and so threshing is when you actually beat the stalks right, of wheatgrass, to separate the berries out, right? And the chaff is sort of this sort of lightweight outer skin around the seeds. And so when you thresh the wheat, you separate the wheat, the berries, the wheat berries from the chaff, which you want to leave behind because it's inedible. And that's what's separating the wheat from the chaff. It's separating the good part, the wheat, from the junk, the chaff, right? That's sort of the metaphor, what it refers to. So separating the wheat from the chaff, the good stuff from the garbage. Hope that helps.
He passes. Go on, Dr. Tachi.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Okay. Now, what were we when it comes to storytelling? What specifically?
Now let's talk about other food-related metaphors. Now we were talking about storytelling, and we're talking about like sort of story. We started out very early on before you were here, Dr. Tachi. We were talking about sort of passion and the role that passion plays in storytelling. And John Wiley actually made a really good point, talking about how it's not necessarily important that you're passionate about the subject of the story, so long as you are passionate about the craft of storytelling, right? So there's some nuance there. You can tell stories about things you're passionate about, and I think JC kind of hit on this too when he was talking about like often expertise is sort of confused for charisma, right? Just because somebody's an expert doesn't necessarily make them a good person to speak on a subject, because they might be expert, but they might also be a terrible storyteller, right? They may be very passionate about something, but might not be able to communicate it well. So we were talking about that, and we were also talking about structure, and I kind of broke down for everybody sort of a standard kind of 4-act structure that I follow in storytelling. But yeah, so that's kind of a quick summation of a bunch of the things that we talked about. If that helps, if you want to chime in on any of those points.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I walked in when you were breaking down the 4-act structure, which is I was like, okay, come on, Tom, teach the people. So that was that was awesome. But then I had to step away. So the whole thing is two things. I actually used to teach when I was a full-time professor. I used to teach performance studies like every other semester. And the whole premise of performance studies is that everyday life is performance. So people often think of performance studies as, oh, it's theater and things like that. Yes, it is. But it's also the fact that as an individual living in the world, you act upon the world in a sense, kind of in a theatrical, everyday way. So if you are a firefighter, you uh, become the role of a firefighter, and you put on the boots, you put on the heavy waterproof coat, you put on the helmet, all of those things to perform your role as a firefighter. And so all of us are performing and doing performative things on a daily basis. So with that is storytelling. So the best stories are going to come out of what you already know, out of everyday life. I think sometimes people play or try, I should say, too hard when it comes to storytelling. You don't have to try so hard. It's like when I teach dance, there are people who are convinced they can't dance, and I tell them, no, you're just trying too hard. I have taught people traditional West African dance who have no West African roots, and they killed it because they stopped trying so hard. So when it comes to storytelling, if you stop trying so hard and just let it flow and let it be, you end up being a much better storyteller, because we perform in everyday life, meaning we tell stories in everyday life. That's one thing. The second thing is I did a 2-year program, and Tom, you're probably familiar with Writers Boot Camp. So I went through their 2-year program, which was basically like a master's program in writing, except there was no in screenwriting, except there was no there was no degree at the end. So I did that, and then I did a refresher course after that, and the purpose of that was to help you come up with a screenplay. So out of the 2 times I did it, I came up with a screenplay for a movie and also a pilot episode for a 30-minute what ended up being a sitcom. Have I done anything with it? No, but I have them, and I'm going to do something with it. So one thing that Writers Bootcamp takes a little bit of a different approach to writing. It's the same thing, but they tell us this. When, then, until. When something happens and then it results in this, it keeps going until this happens. And so that was how they taught us to basically come up with structure for what we were going to do. And that's helpful in terms of, everyday storytelling, whether it's selling something for a brand, branding yourself, when, then, until. So those are my nuggets for today. I release the mic.
Thanks, Dr. Tachi. I got two things I want to throw out to follow up on that. Just a quick one on the when, then, until idea. Another thing, another sort of tool that everybody can use when it comes to telling stories, like literally verbally telling stories to people, even just writing stories out. If you're going to do that, a good sort of technique that I discovered was created by, or came to me where I first heard of it, was Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the guys who created South Park, and have written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes of South Park. One of the things that they use all the time when they're writing their scripts is what they call but therefore. So anytime a lot of people's tendency when they tell stories, a lot of people's tendencies are to simply recite a linear timeline of events, right? So this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, right? Doesn't really take anybody on a journey. It's pretty flat. It's very linear. It's not very exciting, right? Doesn't follow what we call an arc. It totally ignores what I was talking about before with that idea of like that sort of roller coaster metaphor where there are ups and downs and twists and turns, right? When you're just reciting a timeline, timelines are flat, right? So they're featureless. So the idea is whenever you come across telling a story, whether it's written or verbally, whenever you're telling a story and you come across, you find yourself saying, and then, what you should do is replace that and then with a but or a therefore, right? Which will force you to kind of adjust and change direction a little bit in your storytelling. And then the other thing I wanted to say in response to, or to add on to what Dr. Tachi was talking about, is I 100% agree we are absolutely performative in our everyday lives. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to ask you a simple question that I guarantee everybody in this room answers yes to. Have you ever found yourself in a social situation where you act differently with different groups of people? And the answer is yes, because it's something we all do. We all have slightly different versions of ourselves that we share with different groups of people, right? And that fact proves that we are all performative in our daily lives, that we are a version of ourselves with our coworkers and a different version of ourselves with our partners, with our spouses, and a different version of ourselves with our childhood friends, right? So we are performative in everyday life. And when you start to understand that, you can kind of take away the sort of the shackles that the idea of being performative puts on you, and you can use it to your advantage, right? One of the things that I like to say is like if you're getting up on a stage to speak in front of an audience, you should absolutely be yourself, right? You should be you. You should just be you, like turned up to 11, right? So don't try to be somebody else. Just be you turned up to 11. It's performative, right? But you're not playing a character. You're playing yourself, right? So there's a little nuance there, but I just wanted to heighten that and draw everybody's attention to that. I guarantee you answered yes to that question, because if you didn't, I mean, I don't know what to say. You're not human. But yeah, if you answered yes to that question, then there's your proof that we're all performative in our everyday lives, to back up what Dr. Tachi was saying. So what do you think, Dom? Are you one person here, and am I going to get somebody totally different when we're spooning on Valentine's Day?
This is interesting, but I just wonder, my only argument, and not that I have an argument, would be, am I always the same, but the situation just is only calling for a portion of who I am? So I feel like, well, hey, I'm smarter than you think. So when it's pushed to talk about business principle, that's what we talk about. When I'm with my wife and we're watching ridiculousness, I'm still the same person, but different parts of my being are being used or whatever. So I don't, I hear you, but I don't know that when you say perform, that's where
But I think that's because of the weight that word carries, right? That I don't think it necessarily deserves, right? There's nothing wrong with being performative. Like definitionally, you're being performative when you're acting a certain way given a certain context, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about. Like in one situation, you're talking about business, right? And in another situation, you're laughing, watching a silly show with your wife and having a good time, right? Like, and you're going to behave slightly differently in those two situations. That's not a bad thing. It's just reality, and by definition, it's performative. Right. So I don't think it's because there's a negative connotation with that word.
that's what I
Carries
guess I
that
was
weight.
going. Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of people think like, no, I'm not performing. Right. Like that's the common, like that's the pushback that you would get is like, I'm not performing. I'm just being me. It's like, well, yes, but you're being a certain version of you depending on the context. We all do it. Every single person does it. Right. Like we're all a little bit different depending on the situation that we're in. It's just the reality.
Hey, fair point. Go on, Dr. Tachi, and then we're going to hit Prof T, then chat with Prof T and Elise. Go on, Dr. Tachi.
Really quickly, absolutely, Tom. I think, it is the negative connotation that the word perform has. But if you think about it, we all code switch all the time. We speak differently to maybe our children than we would with a friend, than we would with our parents. Certain situations dictate that you speak differently. And here's the thing, often we don't necessarily always know it. So for example, I'm African, but continental African. So, I grew up with different nuances than maybe American kids did, even though I was born here. And then also than African American kids. So with the difference between myself and African American kids when it comes to language is that, yes, we're both Black, but there are differences in the way we speak. So if I am around them, I always usually speak the same way. However, I notice there are things that creep in so that there is a common ground that is found, letting them know, okay, I understand. It's the same with any group that you may be around. So we all code switch depending on where we are and who we're with language wise. So that's an example of the performative nature of language and how we perform.
I got a perfect like sort of extreme example of that to share with everybody. If you want to look for code switching or places you've code switched in your life, I'm sure all of us have done this at some point with one of two scenarios, right? All of us have probably been around a young child, whether it's ours or somebody else's, right? And or been around a puppy, right? And I'm going to draw a little bit of a parallel there, but the way you speak to a young child, and also it's very similar to the way people speak to a puppy, right, is very different than how you would speak to a colleague at work. They're not the same thing, right? Both times it's you just being you, right? You're being authentically yourself, but you're code switching because of the context, right? You're performing differently in the different contexts. So it's a bit of a heightened example to just kind of draw that contrast. But like you would never speak to a coworker the way you speak to a 12-month-old child. You just wouldn't do it. But you speak to each of them differently because the context sort of dictates it. So you perform differently in the different scenarios. So just wanted to share that example. It popped into my head and I thought it was a good one to help draw that contrast. I think Dom, we're moving on to Prof T, right? We got
Prof
Prof
T.
T and Elise.
Thank you for stopping in, Prof T. What do you think about storytelling? You got any tips for us?
Good morning, everybody. or whoever's left. I noticed the time, so I don't want to be long-winded and take up too much of the next
No,
person.
you're good. Go on. Feel free.
So, what I wanted to say, I keep having this poor connectivity button. So if I go out, it's because I guess I'm in a bad cell. I would just say real quickly, for me, storytelling, I've always said this, facts tell, stories sell. So if you're looking at it as a business opportunity, you need to have a story. And, when I'm speaking on stages, I do tell stories. I am authentic. I am Prof T. You're not going to get anybody different. And I am Prof T up to 11. Here's why. Because when people are paying you for a service, they are paying you because they expect you to bring them something that they need to know, that they want to know, that they're looking forward to know. That's why they hired you. They don't just randomly pick you out of a phone book. So you want to make sure that you are sharing stories so that you can relate to the people you're speaking to, and that your relatability. And then finally, I'll just leave with this. Sometimes I see that people tell stories while they're speaking and they go off into the weeds. And there are certain things that are irrelevant when you're sharing a story from the stage. So be very mindful of what you're sharing, how you're sharing it, and how long is it taking you to get to the punchline or to the moral of the story or to the reason you told the story. So it does come with practice. It does come with knowing what you're doing. I highly recommend you find a coach, a counselor, a mentor, an advisor if you plan on going into the speaking circuit. I am now full time on the speaking circuit, and I've learned how to just be authentic, but not be over the top. When people are paying you, they're paying for your expertise. Thank you.
Well done, Prof T, and well said. That you make me think about those people that get caught up in the weeds of certain I love details, but then sometimes you get wrapped up in them, and you're like, get to the point here. So well said, and congrats on this speaking success. Well done, Prof T. Just got to ask, do you have somebody booking things for you? Or are you out there hustling and getting all the speeches yourself?
You are asking a great question, as always, Dom. I'm out there. You guys, for those who follow me, on any social media platform, you're always seeing that, I'm out doing things live. I am meeting with people. I prefer face to face. I go to networking events. I'm also being introduced to key players in our area that are inviting me to come and speak on their stages, which is great. I don't know if you saw, I met Julie Loken for the first time, who's been stranded in Jersey from Chicago, and went and spent the afternoon with her. And so, I always make it a point to try to meet people face to face. So, yeah, I think it's important. As far as hiring somebody, I've been looking. I'm going to tell you, there's plenty of people out there, booking agencies, booking platforms. It ain't cheap, folks. And so I'm just winging it right now, and we'll see what next year brings. If I need to amp it up a bit and hire a PR person, but that's just something that I'm looking down the road. Whatever you guys can add to that would be welcome. Thanks. Great question.
No, good stuff, Prof T. And I would go on like a Thumbtack or something and just make sure your bios are there. I used to do more Thumbtack, and they would send me uh, leads, and then you only pay when you actually bid on the leads. So that, and then there are agencies that will only take a percentage, and so let's say your fee is whatever amount it is, they add their 20%, and they put you in a catalog with 60 speakers, and you get your money, they get their money. So those are the routes I would go short term, other than the hustling that you're doing, and hustling in a good way, being out and about, doing your thing, making sure more people find out about you. And there may be other sites. I just throw out Thumbtack right now because there may be other sites where there are contractors and things like that. So how's that for an answer, Prof T? You may be doing that.
Yeah, I'm involved in a lot of those. And a lot of it is I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I get a lot of crap. And, I just, I'm on so many different platforms for that. And yes, you do pay for a lead. And they may not hire you. So I just paid like X amount of dollars just to let somebody know that, I'm alive. So there's an ebb and flow with that kind of thing for me. It's a love-hate relationship. I don't really need it at the moment, but if I choose next year to amp it up, I'm gonna have to rethink it. But thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. They do send, like, let's say I was on a thumbtack or something like that. Sometimes I'd get, hey, this college, a college is looking for somebody to talk this time to their employees. Send us a bid. I'd send a bid. I'd pay the money to send the bid. Other times it would be like, I'm not supposed to say like, because I get mad at my daughter for saying it. Other times it would be somebody looking for a clown. And I would say, why would I bid on me being a clown? I'm not a clown. So I understand what you're saying. Okay, we will go. Elise, storytelling. You got a tip for us before Tom wraps it up, and maybe we do a quick show and tell. Elise, what do you got?
Hey everyone. Storytelling is such an interesting one. And I remember when I first dove into, wanting to write a book proper, uh, the first time it was 100% seat of the pants style, which is something that I have just come to understand is a common term used for writing. Like seat of the pants is like you just are caught up in the flurry of the story, and so you put pen to paper and you go with it, you flow with it. And that got me very far with my first project, and I learned a lot about writing and storytelling just by going down that path. And then, of course, once that was done, I realized, like, yeah, I should probably figure out how to actually orchestrate and organize this to make it something, it felt like it needed a little bit more legitimacy. And so then I started going to like writing classes and courses just to understand, okay, well, I just had this, incredible momentum and wrote all of these words on this page and concocted this story, this like incredible project, but is that really the way to do it? And then through seminars and writing centers, I learned about the other approach, which is more structured, right? Which includes building out full outlines. And some of the tips and tricks that I picked up there included, using Excel spreadsheets to like really draft and create a story. And that helped me because when I went into my second project, I was still very much, going seat of the pants style, but I found that some of the elements and the components and the tools of the structure that came with that more formal outlining approach really helped me to hone in on, what can sometimes feel like the flurry of inspiration to sit and write and create a full story, paired with, some of the discipline of being able to um, not only write the story and capture that momentum that comes as inspiration, but to do it in a way that helps you build some kind of structure. And it's always a work in progress. Like I feel like I will always be learning and in need of learning how to perfect and apply all of those different tools. But one thing that I definitely have come to really appreciate in my own creative works and projects and just those moments of inspiration, that capture you and you find yourself walking around saying, I need a pencil, I need a paper, like let's capture this as soon as we can, is being able to build out a hybrid of the two, right? Like I've gone into other projects where I have solely tried to just use the outlining and structured approach, right? Where I say, I'm going to write a story and it's going to be about X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to build out this, formulaic outline. And then I go to sit and write it and fill in and it's missing the spark. It's missing that sort of that sensation of a visceral inspiration. And when I go to try and write it, it's not quite the same. And then, of course, the other extreme is when you get caught in a flurry of inspiration and you have this beautiful, flow of words and thoughts and stories, and you capture it as best you can in writing, and then you look at it and you say, all right, well, this definitely needs a little bit more structure. How do I refine this? So I'm finding that, you know, trying to bring the two together and to do it in harmony with one another has really helped me, not only to keep the momentum of something I'm writing, if that momentum is sparked by that kind of inspiration, but to do it in such a way where, as I'm going and I'm kind of like trying to capture, the words and story and thoughts, across the page, I'm stopping and kind of outlining or structuring it as I go so that it doesn't get lost and mired in, I think somebody before had said like the weeds of the details. Because when I first started just doing Seat of the Pants, I was like trying to capture everything within the scene, to tell that story. And I found that using that more structured approach, but not too aggressively, has allowed me to be able to stay in that flow, that Seat of the Pants style, but to refine it a little bit more. But that being said, I feel like I will always be a student of that approach for sure.
Elise, one, Prof T, Dr. Tachi, Jason, I want to say great tips today. Like that, I hope some people listen to the replay. That was brilliant storytelling tips, Elise. So well said. How do you want to be in flow, right? There is flow, a point where you sit down and it just comes out. There are days where it doesn't just come out. So if you can realize that we're all going through that. Okay, so structure, process, being set up, whether it's your computer in a certain place, a book in you write in a certain part of your house, but you still want to have those notebooks around so that when you get in flow, you can, or that when the idea sparks, you can write. So good stuff. So on that note, I'll take you to show and tell. And the show and tell today is, I just pulled it off and I may have showed this before, but it's been a while if I did. This is a little notebook that says first book. In 2005, I worked in Yellow Page ads, and they were big on writing your goals. And so at the time, they made you write my goals, and you would write like so many cells a week and things like that. And very quickly, I started thinking, wait, I have something to say. It's about going broke or getting beat up, and it became. I was working for them, and I changed it to first book, and I started writing notes and things like that. And it took 7 years for me to actually publish a first book. So it took time. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but it all started with that first writing that goal down and then taking action. So that's where I started at. Tom, what are we doing here? We got Phil, Jason, and John. Stop back. So Jason, John, give us a story writing tip. You got 30 seconds, and then we're going Jason, John, Phil, and then Tom's giving us a wrap up. How's that? Jason, what do you got? Story writing tip, 30 seconds.
Just think
Storytelling.
about
You
what
can do storytelling.
moves
Go
you
on.
to
Sorry.
tell it.
I interrupted. Go again.
Just think exactly the most important thing to move to.
Got it. Tom's giving you a head nod. Okay. John, storytelling tip. What do you got for us?
The main thing I would say is the details are less what you think is important. The specifics really, it's about the story, and look for the generally relatable feeling that most will accomplish. And for example, when I had to jump out earlier, Tom talked about lacrosse. Lacrosse is a great sport. I have nephews playing it. I've never played it. If you want to talk to me about overcoming obstacles, become a back into exercising after injuries, yeah, you got my attention. But you get too far in the details of lacrosse and playing a game or football, you're going to lose me. So that's what I'm talking about. When I say this to my guest, a rainy night on it was 8 o'clock at night, and what the temperature was and road conditions really are not that important. It's really what happened and you telling your story. Thank you.
Well done, John. Thank you. And Phil, and I think this also matters what medium you're on too. So Phil, what do you got? Give us a storytelling tip. We haven't heard from you. Go on, Phil. What do you got?
Good morning, everybody. So, here's a tip: when you have opportunity to get better, you think you know your story. Mine, I thought I knew my story for 40 years because I live it every day. When you have opportunity to be around someone, official mentor or not, such I was recently with John J. Wiley, I believe it's important to listen for every specific instruction and also listen for guidance of how they're guiding you to help you tell your story better. And from there, you go back and listen to it, which I had the opportunity when our episode dropped this week, to understand where he was leading me, how he was improving me, and helping me see sides of a story that I never saw before, even though I've lived it for 40 years. So it's important to listen.
100% agree with that. That's a great takeaway. Tom, I got nothing more to say, and we're past our time. Give us a wrap up. Strong, man, strong. Bring it today. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, we've covered quite the gamut today, as is usual for us. You know, nothing new there. But yeah, I mean, I think John's got a good point, and you know, John and I started talking about story, kind of, you know, prompted by you, but that's how the episode started. So why don't we end there, bring it full circle? And I just wanted to add on to what John was saying. He's absolutely right that often the minutia doesn't matter, right? The temperature that it was only matters if you contextualize it within sort of an emotional state, right? And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people miss when it comes to being detailed in your storytelling. It's okay to be detailed, but the details should elicit something and further the story, right? And so if you're going to talk about the temperature, you talk about the temperature that it was that rainy night in context, i.e., it was a rainy night and it was only 50 degrees out. I'd forgotten my coat at home, and so I stood there shivering as water dripped down my back, right? Like that is something that people can relate to. But if you just say it was cold out, I didn't have a raincoat, and it was 53 degrees, people are going to go, okay, and, right? So creating that emotional tie, helping people understand what it felt like to be in that moment in the story, is really the thing that is going to make the difference between taking your audience on a journey and just reciting facts to them, right? So think about that in your storytelling. Remember that it's your job as a storyteller to give your audience the opportunity to empathize with the characters in your story. And in order for them to do that, you have to paint a picture of what it felt like or feels like to be that person in that moment, right? So give them that emotional context so that they can empathize, and you can take them on the journey that you want to take them on and lead them to the conclusion that you want them to reach. That will lead to you telling good stories. So that's what I got for today for a wrap up. Hopefully that worked well. I was trying to keep it concise. I could have gone on for hours and hours and hours. I wrote a whole freaking book about legendeering, which is, you know, sort of my way of using storytelling to help businesses build relationships with the communities that they serve. So, you know, I got a lot to say about storytelling, about 225 pages to say about storytelling. But so I could have gone on for a long time. When I get the audiobook recorded, we'll see exactly how many hours that takes. But I'll wrap up with that. I just want to highlight a couple of things for you guys before we go today. First is, as I just mentioned, my first book, Legendeering, just came out, just officially launched on Monday. So we're just a couple of days in. Already hit some supply chain issues, but those things are getting ironed out between the printer and shipping and the retailers. So the book is available. If you go to the website that Dominick was kind enough to share the link to in Clubhouse, it's just legendeering.io. Legendeering.io. Go there. You can learn more about Legendeering. You can learn a little bit more about me. You can order the book. There's a whole bunch of links there. If you want to avoid any supply chain issues, you can order the book directly from the printer. They actually have a warehouse and a retail sales site, so you can order it directly from there, from Casemate. But I appreciate everybody's support. Really looking forward to to riding this journey out and seeing the impact we can create with legendeering and humanizing the world of business. So appreciate you all for that. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention why Dom and I were talking about spooning early on in the episode. It's because I'm going to be staying over at Dom's house on the night of Valentine's Day, and that's because right after that we are heading to Chicago to Creative Con, a conference that we've been working for the last several months with our friend Julie Loken and our other friend Heidi Dunstan to put together to really help people further their creative pursuits, right? So this conference is specifically designed for creative entrepreneurs, whether you want to write a book, start a podcast, create a video series, whatever the case may be. We are putting together a killer panel of folks to be there to help you guys further those ambitions. There's going to be inspiration on the main stage and then application in the workshops in the afternoons. So you'll get both sides of things. I think it's a really unique approach to putting on a conference like this. It's the first of its kind, and we're all super excited about it. So that's why I'm going to be hanging out with Dom on Valentine's Day. If you want more information about Creative Con, just go to creativecon.com. It's CRE, the number 8, TIVECON.com. creativecon.com. You can get tickets. You can learn more about the process, who's going to be speaking, etc. And of course, follow us on social media. Dom is at Motivation Champs. I'm at Talex Media LLC, and you can learn more about it there as well. That's all I got for today. So until next week, I'm Tom for Dom. This is not the smartest guys in the room. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys, and we will see you very, very soon. Thanks so much for being here. Bye-bye now.